Kandahar province, southern Afghanistan, the birthplace of the Taliban. The city's under siege. Mines and suicide bombs target American troops, as well as the Afghan army and police. But a hidden side of this war are the forces that NATO is unleashing to defeat the Taliban. America's creating militias, recruiting and arming irregular soldiers that operate in and out of uniform. Channel 4 News has been looking at the role of militias in Kandahar. We've heard allegations of theft, corruption, targeted assassination and murder. People here wonder if forces allied to NATO are out of control. Last November, this girl's father, Janan Abdullah, was killed. His image survives on a mobile phone. He died when their home was stormed by what the family told us were US soldiers, joined by an armed Afghan group.
They threw the grenade through here, through this window. Nothing was left without damage. They shot at everything. Everywhere you look, you can find a bullet hole.
According to the family, the Americans were in charge, but it was the Afghans who did the dirty work and fired the shots.
Janan was sprayed with bullets. His chest was riddled. His whole body was pierced. He was just lying in bed. I'd say they fired 200 bullets at him.
The family was told that Janan was a suspected terrorist, but say they heard later from NATO it was all a mistake. The next morning, the scene was photographed by human rights investigators. Yet in a statement to Channel 4 News, US forces said they had no record of the raid that night. The family told us the injured were taken for treatment at a nearby American base.
What was their crime? Give me a single proof against them. No human can bear this.
Not only was Janan killed and his wife paralysed, the Afghan militia stole nearly £3,000, say the family.
We were surprised. It was our own people, Pashtuns, who did this. They were so cruel to us. We thought that not even the Americans can be this cruel. And they aren't even Muslims. But they weren't that brutal. It was those from our own country doing this to us.
This family is one of many in Kandahar who complain of being targeted by militia groups backed by the US. The militia alleged to have killed Janan is thought by human rights investigators to be based at a restricted American complex in the hills outside the city. Known as Camp Gecko, behind its walls is the former home of the Taliban's leader, Mullah Omar. It's now the headquarters of both the CIA and US Special Forces. The US is spending millions training conventional and elite Afghan forces to provide security. But in Camp Gecko, there's also a force wearing uniform and carrying American weapons that some locals regard as little more than a death squad.
If you go to Kandahar, people say these guys pretend to be interpreters, but carry out night raids and assassinations. Most people in Kandahar are illiterate. They don't know if they're Afghan special forces or militia. We hear lots of strange and shocking stories.
General Ghulam Ranjbar is the chief military prosecutor of Afghanistan. He's investigating the role of the Camp Gecko militia in the now infamous killing of Kandahar's police chief. Matiullah Kate was gunned down in broad daylight last year, along with other senior policemen, by the Afghan militia based at Camp Gecko. This is the crime scene. The group arrived here with American-supplied uniforms, weapons and vehicles. They came here to force prosecutors to release one of their members from jail. We met a man who witnessed the killing.
The police chief took 2 steps forward, and that's when they fired. Within just a couple of seconds, he was sprayed with bullets. Then the head of CID came over. He pulled out his pistol and prepared to fire, but he was shot from behind. He lay there and screamed, "Stop shooting." That's what happened.
41 members of the gang have now been jailed, but the militia itself remains in operation, and those at its top have never been prosecuted. We can reveal the Afghan prosecutor in charge has ordered the arrest of an American commander who he says sanctioned the fatal raid. He doesn't claim Americans ordered the killing, but accuses them of creating a militia that was above the law. A spokesman for US forces said the coalition was not involved in the attack, and nor was it sanctioned. The US refuses to refer to the Camp Gecko force as a militia. The spokesman insisted both NATO and US Special Forces do not support militia groups. General Ranjbar remains angry.
We lost one of this country's best law enforcement officers for the release of a mercenary who's a criminal.
This isn't the only militia working here in Kandahar. Some work not only for the coalition, but in settling private scores. Shahida Hussain, a human rights campaigner, is meeting Shah Aga. When he attempted to protect his daughter from marital abuse, her husband, he says, hired a private militia. He claims the militia ransacked his home, stole his valuables, and used their connections to get him jailed.
We are tired. You need to help me. I'm poor. I'm in pieces. They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't.
The private gangs that did such crimes, says Shahida, operate with impunity because they have protection.
If someone kills someone, the government itself says don't touch him, don't bother him. He's our friend, he's our relative, he has a connection with us. There's no real government here. This place is run by people in the drugs trade, armed with weapons and backed by foreign countries.
Why are Kandahar's militias so powerful? The question is answered by some locals in 3 words: Ahmed Wali Karzai. Appearing here at a tribal meeting with his brother, the President of Afghanistan, Ahmed Wali, who's also chairman of the Kandahar Provincial Council, is said by insiders to supply gunmen to the US military and the CIA, as well as operate his own private forces. Talking later to me, Ahmed Wali said he wants an amnesty for the killers of the police chief, describing the whole incident as a misunderstanding. More broadly, though, he denies any involvement with any militias and regards any allegations against him as mischief by his political opponents. One senior prosecutor in Kandahar, who asked for his face not to be shown, told us the president's brother was untouchable.
To my knowledge, there has never been a case filed against him, so we don't have anything on him. If someone was brave enough to complain, then everybody could know about his activity. But even then, it would not be possible to issue a warrant against him. He is above the law.
The United States has been in this country, Afghanistan, for more than 8 years. But in their haste to defeat first terrorism and Al-Qaeda and more recently the revived Taliban, have they in effect been creating a monster? Have they been arming the very people who are driving the population into the arms of the Taliban and against the government? We travelled outside Kandahar city. Here in the countryside, where the Taliban now dominates, some in the US military believe that militias are a solution. US special forces are discreetly organising villages into armed, irregular groups to defend their homes against the Taliban. The military wouldn't allow us access to these forces, but with the help of local contacts, we track one unit down. These are exclusive pictures of America's newest allies. They may look like Taliban, with their Kalashnikovs, rocket-propelled grenades and belts of ammunition, but a yellow fluorescent belt and a red cloth tied to their rifle is the signal that these are not the enemy.
Now that we provide security, things are getting done in the village. Ditches are being dug, roads are being built.
The men here relax in their home turf, sometimes sampling the local marijuana. Though set up by US Special Forces, the men deny they're under American orders.
They've asked us to join them, but we said no. We work with them sometimes, but only for the sake of our village. Everyone in the village is happy with us. If you have any doubt, then you can go and ask them.
But the villagers I met were hostile. This man, an important elder, said the militia targeted innocent people and wasn't interested in security.
These militia are from local tribes. They don't care about our country. They're just concerned about money. That's it. Because of these local militia, our government's not improving. Security is worse now.
In another nearby village, elders have more complaints about the new militias.
We can't tell who's militia or Taliban. They're all holding guns. They don't have uniform. We can't tell.
The Afghan army commander working with the Americans has a solution. Set up your own militia to handle security.
Look, you know the good and bad guys in your village, so it's entirely up to you how you rule them. I'll support you and provide you weapons and salary. At least provide security for yourself. I beg you, make your own militia and protect your own village by yourself.
His plea is evidence that, rather than scaling back, the US is expanding the use of militias. Some aren't impressed.
I was in the army for 2 years, and so the Taliban became my enemy. I'm afraid of them. Now you say you'll give me a gun and you want me to form a militia, but tomorrow you'll take it away. By then I'll have even more enemies.
Even American soldiers on the ground point out the policy of creating a system of village militias is controversial and echoes mistakes made by the Russians.
This area's had a history of, you don't want to call them militias, but that's what the Russians tried to set up when they were here decades ago. You know, a local militia. And the militias were horrible to them. They mistreated the people. They did some bad things. So historically, they've been wary of outsiders coming in and saying we're here to help, when in fact they're doing the opposite.
The Americans are aware of the history of militias in Afghanistan. They say everything they're doing has the backing of the Afghan government.
We just finished with Sector Alpha.
Troops from NATO are preparing for what they're expecting to be a bloody summer of fighting. But there's concern their new offensive in Kandahar is already being undermined by forces that were supposed to bring security.